If you visit certain cemeteries in New Jersey or Illinois today, you'll find graves surrounded by modern radiation warning signs. The women buried beneath them rest in lead-lined coffins, their bones still so highly radioactive that they remain a danger to the public nearly a century after their deaths. Long before those hazard signs went up, the substance that killed these women was a global sensation. When Marie Curie discovered radium in 1898, the scientific community marveled at an element that seemed to produce endless energy out of nowhere. By the 1910s, that scientific marvel had become a full-blown consumer obsession. You could buy radium-laced cosmetics to brighten your skin, radium toothpaste to whiten your smile, and glowing health waters designed to cure everything from arthritis to fatigue. The belief in its healing properties was absolute. Wealthy industrialist Evan Byers famously consumed over 1,400 bottles of a drinkable radium patent medicine called Radithor. He swore by its benefits right up until his jaw deteriorated and he died of severe radiation exposure in 1932. Because society viewed this glowing green substance as an elixir rather than a hazard, there were zero safety regulations surrounding its commercial use. That lack of oversight paved the way for an industrial tragedy. Look closely at the numbers on this antique watch dial. During World War I, the U.S. Radium Corporation secured lucrative military contracts to produce instruments painted with undark, a luminous paint made with radium-226, so soldiers could read their gear in the trenches at night. To meet the massive wartime demand, the company hired roughly 4,000 workers over the years. The vast majority were young women, many of them teenagers between 14 and 18 years old. They flocked to the factories because the pay, 1.5 cents per dial, amounted to an excellent wage for women at the time. The dials were extremely small, requiring pinpoint accuracy. Management instructed the girls to use a technique called lip pointing. They were taught to place the radium-soaked camel hair brushes between their lips to maintain a sharp, fine point. With an average quota of over 300 dials a day, the workers were swallowing small amounts of radium with every brushstroke. The continuous exposure led to a surreal side effect. When the workers walked home after their shifts, their clothes, hair, and even their skin visibly glowed in the dark. The locals started calling them the Ghost Girls. Unaware of any danger, the girls leaned into the phenomenon. They purposely wore their best dresses to the factory so they would shine at evening dances, and sometimes painted the glowing mixture directly onto their fingernails and teeth to surprise their friends. They took pride in their radiant appearance, unaware that the substance they were playfully using to paint their smiles was a fatal poison, accumulating in their bodies. The illusion of radium as a harmless novelty shattered in 1922. That year, a 19-year-old dial painter named Molly Maggia became the first known casualty of the factory floors. Her decline was swift and horrifying. It began with aching teeth that eventually had to be extracted, but the extraction sites refused to heal. Soon, her jaw began to literally disintegrate and collapse. To understand what happened to Molly, we have to look at this animation of bone chemistry. The human body treats radium as if it were calcium. Because they share similar chemical properties, the body deposits the ingested radium directly into the skeletal structure. Once locked inside the skeleton, the radium has nowhere to go. It sits there, actively decaying and emitting constant radiation directly into the bone marrow from the inside out, 24 hours a day. This internal bombardment destroys the blood-producing marrow. The workers developed severe aplastic anemia because their bodies could no longer produce red blood cells, and the localized radiation triggered aggressive bone sarcomas in their jaws and long bones. The radium had effectively replaced the calcium in their bones. Through this biological deception, their own skeletons had been turned into sources of constant internal radiation. The rapid deterioration of these young women was alarming, but it wasn't a mystery to the people in charge. The scientists and executives at the U.S. Radium Corporation knew exactly how dangerous their product was. In the company's own laboratories, chemists handled radium with extreme caution. They wore thick, heavy gloves, operated behind dense lead screens, and used long metal tongs to avoid ever making direct physical contact with the element. Meanwhile, out on the factory floor, the teenage girls were given no protective gear whatsoever. When they asked about the paint, managers directly reassured them that the glowing mixture was healthful. As the death toll mounted, the company launched a sophisticated misinformation campaign. executives quietly commissioned an independent medical study to investigate the illnesses. When the research concluded that radium was the culprit, the corporation buried the findings. They then deployed their cruelest tactic. To evade legal liability and cut off financial claims, company-paid doctors began diagnosing the dying dial painters with syphilis. This provided a false cause of death while ruining the young women's reputations in their communities. The U.S. Radium Corporation prioritized industrial profit over the lives of its workforce, knowingly exposing teenage girls to a lethal substance while shielding their own scientists from the same risk. By 1927, a dial painter named Grace Fryer decided to fight back. Despite her failing health, she gathered 4 of her former colleagues, seen here, and filed a lawsuit against the U.S. Radium Corporation. Their legal rebellion triggered a national media circus. As newspapers plastered the story of the Radium Girls across their front pages, the American public was finally forced to confront the dark reality of the miracle element. In response, the corporation's legal team weaponized time. Knowing the plaintiffs only had months to live, U.S. Radium stalled the court proceedings, dragging out motions as the women physically deteriorated in front of the judge. Facing imminent death and unable to endure a protracted trial, the remaining women accepted an out-of-court settlement of $10,000 each in 1928. Within months, most of the core plaintiffs succumbed to their illnesses. The settlement provided the dying women with funds for medical care and burial, but more importantly, it established a legal admission of the company's liability. By winning this case, the plaintiffs ensured the corporation could no longer claim the deaths were unrelated to their employment. 6 years later, in 1934, Marie Curie herself died from aplastic anemia caused by a lifetime of radium exposure. She shared the exact same fate as the factory girls who had used her discovery. But the women's medical histories provided crucial data. When the U.S. government launched the Manhattan Project in the 1940s, the strict radiation safety protocols established for its workforce were built directly upon the medical and legal precedents secured by Grace Fryer's case. This legal and medical paper trail led directly to the formation of safety protocols that became the standard for American industry, eventually contributing to the creation of OSHA in 1970. As the saying goes, the girls who glowed in the dark died in the light. The dial painters left a radioactive legacy that still persists in the earth today. Their refusal to be silenced ensured that future corporations would be held legally responsible for the safety of their employees.